Hello, Glenn. What's going on?
Dave, man, you the man. Tell me what's going on with you.
Well, just another day in the auto repair industry.
Exciting, isn't it?
It's absolutely.
You know what? It never gets boring. Honest to God, I've been in this for 50 years. Dave's been in there we have almost 100 years together in this industry. It's pretty amazing. It never gets boring. There's always something new, something funny, something ridiculous that happens.
Well, absolutely, and it's kind of crazy because you and I work on all makes and all models, so we get to see a lot of different stuff, and we get to see some crazy things, like you said. One of the things that I've noticed this year more than years past is that we've been getting more and more cars that have come into our shop that had been to another place or maybe even 4 other places where they have thrown parts at the car and did not fix the issue that it really came in for. And some of the things that I guess we want to let our listeners know and be aware of is that when you go into a shop, if you have a running problem or you have any type of problem, you want to make sure that they are qualified to do the full repairs and do the diagnosis correctly.
Exactly. In fact, we've been soliciting shops that we know don't do the more sophisticated repairs and diagnostics to see if they want to send their work to us, because it's so frequent that we see these disastrous results. I had a lady call me yesterday about her hybrid. She took it to a national brand place where they don't specialize in hybrids. Well, she drove her car in there, and when they finished looking at it, they said, you need a hybrid battery, and she couldn't drive it. The car wouldn't start again. So they had to have done something. I mean, the vehicle made it there. They opened the hood. They did a code read or whatever. They said, you need a hybrid battery, and she couldn't start her car. Now, I would have been just pissed off beyond all get out,
And the more, I guess the bigger problem that we see is once you get 4 or 5 hands underneath the hood of that car, you kind of have to get back to the starting point when the problem started. And one of the things that's so important on the customer side is giving us all the information. There has been times when literally I've had a car that has been at 2 or 3 other places, and they come to me, and I just ask them enough questions to where I pretty much know what's wrong with the car.
Yeah. Well, here's another example. Yesterday, a lady comes in with a pickup truck, and she says, I'm hearing this squeaking noise, when I'm driving, and I don't know, can you tell me where it's coming from? She says, but don't roll down the windows because the windows won't roll back up. So one of my techs takes it out. My highest skilled tech takes it out. He's got like cat ears. I mean, he can hear anything, right? He couldn't hear the squeak. So he rolled the window down, and all of a sudden you can hear the squeak. It was a wheel bearing, but and it was on the passenger side. So anyway, she needs a wheel bearing. We did get her window back up. She has slow window regulators that probably need to be replaced soon. But the point is that people say they hear something, they don't tell you where it's coming from or when they hear it. Do you hear it when you're applying the brakes, or do you hear it when you're making a turn, or do you hear it when you start the car? It could be a belt squeal. It could be a pulley in the engine. Asking the right question is going to get you probably closer to the truth.
Right, and also along those lines, what you're talking about, we put a policy in place at my shop that literally when you got a squeak, a vibration, we go for a ride with the customer.
Yeah, you get in the car with us.
Yeah, because we have actually fixed the wrong noise before. We jumped into one car, and this noise was so obnoxious, we fixed it, and the customer said, well, that wasn't the noise. That's been there ever since I've owned the car.
And so he tuned it out.
Yeah, and there's just another noise that was barely could hear it.
I think that works sometimes in marriage, right? You just kind of selective hearing, and
pretty much.
You kind of mute things out that you hear all the time, like, you idiot.
I don't. My wife doesn't listen to me anymore.
Yeah, I get it.
But that's a very it's very important to where you want to get the repair done correctly the first time, and you want to make sure that you fix the right noise or the right vibration or whatever. So it's really important that you do ride with the customer. Another thing is these diagnosing at parts stores, diagnosing cars. Well, what happens is they
don't get me started.
Yeah, they'll pull a code, and then what do? They give you a list. You start at the top.
Yeah, give you a ticker tape that says, well, it could be this. I mean, I've seen ticker tapes as long as 20 different things that could cause that. And so what are you going to do? Buy 20 parts that you don't even know where they're located and try to install them yourself?
Right, and then you run the risk of putting
And
those
maybe
parts in the
none of
car.
them, maybe none of them are going to fix
Right,
it.
right, absolutely not. And then you run the risk of going in there and then you install that part incorrectly. Now you created another problem. So now when you end up taking it to a shop like yours or mine, what happens is we have to go back and we have to kind of leave no stone unturned. We have to go back and recheck all the work that's been done on the car and try to get it back to where it was when the original problem started.
Right, and so oftentimes the problem isn't the part itself. It's the power supply to it. Where is that? Where are these wires coming from? Are they coming from the PCM, the powertrain control module, or is it coming from the transmission control module? Now these cars have 20, 30, 50 modules on them, and sometimes there are communication issues between the modules. They call it bus communication. So the deal is it's so sophisticated, and I'm not trying to over-exaggerate or overcomplicate something, but oftentimes we find the problems in a module or the wiring. Had a lady had a engine put in a Jeep, and these guys took all of the insulation off of the wiring harnesses when they put it in. So over a period of weeks, the wires started rubbing on the edges of bolts and nuts and screws that were hanging around the engine they're supposed to be harness clips. So they ran the wires through these things, and they're rubbing back and forth, and she had like 80 codes in this
Well,
thing.
and we kind of had the same. We had a car come from another shop that was having trouble with it, and they had done some work to it. And what happened was the main power cable, it ended up started rubbing on something metal, and it rubbed the coating off of the top of it. And what happened was it would actually, driving down the road, make the right turn, hit the right bump, and it would cut the radio and the AC out. The main power, that's the two things that it affected.
Wow.
And it was a weird problem. But
Could have been worse than that for sure.
yeah, and we were just fortunate enough to where we got it up on the rack, and then we ended up seeing where it was arcing.
Yeah.
And then we figured it out. But yeah, crazy things like that happen. Like you said earlier in the podcast, is that we never have a dull moment. We get into some of that stuff, and we know, and you know as well as I do, that throwing parts at a car to try to fix it is not the right thing to do.
No,
You
never.
need to. We invest highly in sophisticated, expensive equipment so we can diagnose your car correctly the first time. And you want to make sure that when you are going to a shop that you go in there and that's one of the first questions you should ask them. Do you have the ability to diagnose my car?
Yeah. Well, in most cases, they don't want to say, no, we don't. So they're going to take a stab at it anyway, and then they make the problem worse. And it makes it worse for us when we have to try to uncopulate what they copulated.
Well, and I think the shops, I think some shops are getting smarter about that, because the thing of it is what happens is they end up making a customer unhappy. They throw a bunch of parts in the car, they don't fix nothing, then the customer don't want to pay the bill.
Well, but then they think that you're the same. They'll take it to someone, but now they have an implicit mistrust before they even grace your threshold.
Yeah, and another thing is yes, you are going to have to pay for a diagnosis. When you bring your car into a qualified shop, you are going to have to pay for diagnosis, and that's one of the things that that this free diagnosis, when you see it on the side of a building or a parts store, it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't.
And if they're doing it for free, they're going to build it in no one can afford to look at your car for an hour or two, and in some cases 3 or 4 hours to find out what's wrong with it. And we hope that never happens. And we don't like sitting there for hours trying to pin wires and pull your carpeting out and find out that you had something leaking in your car and it flooded one of your modules. But it happens all the time.
Right, and
bad windshield installation can cause it.
Right, and one of the things you don't want to do is go to your doctor and have him just tell him, hey, I got a pain in my stomach. You want to cut me open and see what's going on in there?
Yeah.
No, he needs to do some diagnosing. Needs to be take.
He pulls out a
pictures.
knife, I'd run like hell.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of the gist of it. If you're not diagnosing the car correctly, what happens is you're doing exploratory surgery on something, and it's going to end up in the end costing you way more money, and it's going to be harder to diagnose once somebody's went in there and just thrown parts at it. So we highly recommend it, and we tell our clients all the time when they come into our shop, this is our process, this is what we do, this works.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we diagnose your car the first time. We don't want to call you 10 times and tell you that you need this part, now you need this part, now you need that part.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we've kind of leave no stone unturned.
When we had a car in last week that someone had actually repaired. They found a broken wire somewhere and they repaired it, but they didn't crimp the connector They call
Something
them
simple like that,
they
right?
call them butt connectors,
Yeah.
and the thing vibrated back out, and he had the same problem.
Isn't that crazy how something so simple, and you know, and I know you tell your techs this, and I tell all the people that are on my team that, look, if we don't have time to do it right the first time, we sure as heck don't have time to do it right the second time.
Yeah.
So we got to make sure that when we're doing, it's the little things that, like you said, not crimping that wire on there.
Well, then, and those things also, you're supposed to heat shrink them. You know, besides just crimping it down, you can take a little cigarette lighter in your hand and you melt the plastic, and it fuses the plastic insulated part to, you know, so even if the crimp isn't good, if it's touching inside the thing, you know, in the cavity of the connector, it at least seals it in there so it can't come apart.
Right, exactly, and that's that little thing there could drive you bonkers trying to figure it out because you can't really see it. It's moving around in there and it's not making a good connection. You got to go in there and, like you said, you just got to start pulling on stuff and manipulating wiring harnesses and
or even using the correct type of connector. You know,
right.
You use a big connector for a small wire. I don't care how hard you crimp it; it's not going to make contact.
Yeah, and those are things that very detail oriented, and that's one of the things that I know at your shop you preach to your guys and I preach to my guys. We want to make sure that we're very detail oriented because we don't want to have those problems where we're just going crazy trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? It's something simple like that could be a big problem.
Well, there's an old saying: one shit cancels out 10 attaboys. You know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
It's really important that the mistakes that are made by a shop can tarnish their reputation, and people start to see reviews now that, you know, over and over and over. The shop, 10 customers are boasting, and then you got 2 people who had a bad experience, and then.
But you know, and another thing, Glenn, we got to cover is that we're not sitting here saying we're perfect.
No,
we make mistakes too. But the thing of it is we own up to them, we fix them, we do what we have to do to make sure that customer's taken care of.
Yeah, and sometimes it costs us a lot of time and money, but that's not the point. The point is that we make it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't make excuses.
Well, no, and believe me, if we make a mistake, we say, hey, we made a mistake, and we're going to take care of it. And that's what good shops do. They want to make. If they do make a mistake, they want to own up to it, but they want to keep that mistake from happening again. And I know you do the same thing I do. When a mistake happens in your shop, you're like the first things out of your mouth is how do we keep this from happening again? Because we don't want this. We don't want to repeat it. No. So we stay on top of those things, and that's what a good shop should do. And so another thing is you know, how do you feel about fluids?
Well, fluids are, you know, some of the most important things that actually exist in your vehicle to keep your cooling system right, to make your tranny shift right, to make your oiling system for your engine work right. I mean,
well,
fluids.
What can happen when you put the wrong fluid in the transmission,
the
differential, or even the engine?
Well, I'll tell you, in these days with these sophisticated transmissions that have, you know, up to 10 speeds.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day there was 2-speed, 3-speed was like a big innovation, and the next thing you know, it's 5-speed, 7-speed, 9-speed, 10-speed. It's like, and for all of these things to interact with each other with electronic solenoids and so on, we have CVT, you know, constant velocity transmissions, continuous velocity, where the thing just basically slides in the next gear. You put the wrong fluid in there, it'll destroy the transmission.
Right, or it won't shift correctly. I mean, you got to be really precise. That's another thing, you know, back in, you've been doing this a long time. Back 20 years ago, I mean, what did they have, 2-3 types of fluids? I mean, literally, it was ATF, was it Dextron?
Uh-huh.
They had Dextron and Type F, right?
Right.
And they were
Type A, Type F, and Dextron.
Right. I mean, there was really not a lot of choices. Now, I don't even know how many different types of tranny fluid there is, but there's probably, I don't know, probably 100, maybe more. I don't know.
Right, and then there are some universal ones that are good, and they work in probably
right.
the
but
majority
you
of
careful.
them.
You mentioned the 10 speeds, though. Like the 10 speeds, some of those 10-speed trannies, you've got to put the exact fluid in there, or you will have a problem.
And when it happens, and if it's under warranty, guess what?
Your warranty is no longer.
Your warranty is
yeah.
void because you put the wrong fluid. So they actually build certain colors or characteristics into that fluid so that the manufacturers can tell whether you put the wrong fluid in it.
Well, another thing too is you know, back in the day, what the engine oil, thicker was better.
Yeah.
Do you remember 2050? We're putting 2050 in cars. And
There
then
was
also-
straight 40 and straight 50.
Right. Well, yeah. And
Even
then,
for racing, they still use 40 and 50 weight oils.
right,
for
and then,
racing
then
engines.
you had motor honey that you used to
Oh,
put
yeah.
in there. You used to have to
Looked
heat
like
up.
Caro syrup, you know.
Well, you had to put it in a microwave to pour it out of the bottle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd be there for an
Oh,
hour.
if you're in a cold area, there's no way you're going to get it out of there.
So now the whole school of thought is different. It's the opposite. Thinner is better.
008, 012, 016.
020.
What is zero? I mean,
Well, what happens if you what would happen if you tried to put 2050 in a car that takes 016 or 020?
it'd blow it up pretty quick.
What? Because guess what?
There'd be no lubrication.
Right, the tolerances in these motors are so tight that thicker fluid isn't going to get in there to lubricate anything. Right.
Yeah, it's like trying to squeeze, toothpaste through a needle or something. It doesn't work.
Right. So, in the fluids, having the right fluids and having a shop that has all the different fluids and has the correct fluids in your car is important too.
Yeah. So we have synthetic, non-synthetic. Most vehicle engines now require full synthetic oil. So what's the difference between synthetic and non-synthetic oil? Are they made from vegetables? I mean.
Well, I mean, they used to call it conventional.
Right.
And then you got synthetic blend.
Yeah.
And basically full synthetic, which is just smaller molecules, is really what it is.
Exactly. It's molecularly engineered differently than conventional oil.
Right. And conventional always did have kind of some synthetic properties in it. I mean, they had smaller molecules in it too. But now then they went to semi-synthetic, and now they went to full synthetic. And pretty much, I mean, all the newer cars are pretty much full synthetic.
Yeah, and if you can imagine a zero weight, 0.8 or 0.10 or 12 or 16, which is
It's pretty thin.
Lots of companies are using it. Yeah, it is. It almost runs like water.
Yeah.
But they still lubricate it. It's I'm not an engineer.
But the smaller
I just play
molecules-
one on TV. But
But the smaller molecules is what really makes the difference, because it has to get in those tighter areas.
It does.
Where the tolerances are so tight.
right, and you can't imagine larger molecules not being able to go through an engine, through its bearings and all the lubricable parts. But it does make a difference, and in making these engines, that's why your engine now lasts for so long. There's also some downsides to, some of the technologies they're building in there, which can make your engine fail sooner if you don't keep your eye on certain things.
Well, and there again, it's back to the fluids. I mean, you got to put the right fluids back in there. If you want the most life, you got to service your vehicle when it's supposed to be serviced, depending on what vehicle you have. But if you want to find out what oil you should be putting in your car, it's in your owner's manual.
yeah.
Look in your owner's manual, and you can find it in there. And so when you go into a shop, you want to make sure you can always ask them, hey, my car takes 016. Do you guys have that oil here? Make sure you ask.
Yeah.
If they're just putting one weight in all cars, you want to make sure you avoid
Well,
that.
if they're an experienced shop, they should know that. And oftentimes now they're putting it right on the oil cap, what the weight of the oil is.
Right.
You just have to know the quantity that it holds.
And then cooling system. Then definitely our cooling systems. We want to make sure we're putting the right cooling system in there, right coolant in there, I should say, not cooling system, but the right coolant in there too, because there's all different types of coolant. They've went ahead and they've got used to be all green, just
Yeah.
was antifreeze, right? You just had a jug of antifreeze and it was all green. Now it's it could be red, it could be blue, it could be yellow, it could be a lot of different colors. So you
Yeah,
want
and
to make
it's
sure.
not, and it's just not just food coloring. I mean, it's actually the makeup of the antifreeze itself is made compatible with all of the aluminum and all of the steel and all the different brass and all the things that are in that motor, and it keeps them all from corroding and decomposing, because at the end of the day, if those little particles, if you're using the wrong antifreeze, those things start to disintegrate or build up scale on them or whatever, you're going to have serious overheating problems at some point.
Right, absolutely, and that in Arizona you definitely don't want, because it gets really hot here. Batteries, are all batteries made equal?
Batteries are not all made equal. In fact, if you've ever seen cutaways of batteries, of a good quality battery and a poor quality battery, no matter how large the battery is, it has a certain amount of plates per square inch.
Yeah.
And those plates are made out of zinc and lead, and then the acid actually makes them. The battery acid makes it turn electrolytic, and that's what produces electricity in the battery. But how many plates, how thick those plates are, has makes a big difference between the longevity and the actual power that battery can deliver to the vehicle.
Right, and how they vent. The vent systems on them are so important too, because what happens when they vent the wrong way, you start to see that little mushroom growing on the cables, and that mushroom it's acid.
And
What
it's not just
cable.
on the cable ends; it actually starts crawling up the cable and separating the wires. And with these new sophisticated cars needing 100% of that energy that is produced from the battery and the alternator, which charges the battery, going into the electrical system, those separated wires could start breaking down the voltage because it's no longer one strong cable, which is made out of maybe 50 to 100 little thin copper wires in it. When the acid gets in between there, the corrosion starts crawling up, it separates those wires so they can no longer deliver the same amount of electricity.
And here's another thing. Back in the day, you had a battery cable that was 12 inches long. So if the cable got corroded, not a big deal. Now, you've got a whole wiring harness.
Yeah.
It's a 3-4 hour job
And
to take all of it apart.
and many batteries are in the trunk. They're 15 feet away.
Right, and so you've turned a real minor problem into a major problem, and it's
Right.
going to cost you a ton of money to replace that whole wiring
Oh
harness.
my gosh! Some of the harnesses themselves, our actual cost is $1,200-$1,300 because there's so many other wires that go to modules
Yeah.
that come off those cables.
Oh, absolutely, so it's really important, and I think you alluded to this earlier, is that you've got so many systems and so many little computers. Really, what these boxes are, they're just miniature computers. And these miniature computers need so much voltage. It's just like taking your PC and cutting the power in half to your PC. What do you think is going to happen? It's
Yeah.
going to wig out. It's not going to know what to do, and it's not going to function properly.
Yeah, and also even the fuse boxes in the vehicle now are made up of layers of circuit boards. It used to be one circuit board, all of your fuses plugged into the thing, and it ran all the stuff on your car. And if it needed sub boxes or whatever, now some of these ones, on GMs and Chryslers, and some of these have like 6 layers of circuit boards, like 6 inches by 5 inches, and they have all these little circuits, and they are supplying the power to all those modules all over your vehicle. And when one of those circuit boards fails in there, the entire box has to be replaced. You're talking about thousands of dollars to replace those.
So what
things.
you're really saying here, Glenn, is that the most important thing is buy the right battery, but have it installed by somebody that knows what they're doing. Because how many times have you seen a battery that was installed incorrectly?
Yeah, incorrectly, like they didn't put the hold on. Oh, what is this for? And they throw it aside. Now the battery's jumping all over. Every time you hit a bump, those cables could hit like a positive cable could hit any ground inside the engine compartment and short out, your entire electrical system, or start the car on fire.
We've actually seen it where if the cables are long enough, we've actually seen them where they've hooked it up backwards.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So that's not good. Now, a lot of the cars nowadays, the wiring harnesses are so tight, you really have a harder time doing that. But,
yes.
Years ago, those cables were long enough to where you could swap them.
Yeah, so that's why at least on the older cars, used to put the positive cable was red and the negative cable was black, but now it's just indiscriminate. It's not black or red or any other color. They're just there. And they're supposed to be in their place. They're all wrapped up. You don't even know what color it is.
Right. So when you're having your battery installed, you want to have it installed by somebody that does it, not by maybe if you do buy a battery at a parts store, maybe you ought to take it somewhere and have somebody install it, unless they're qualified to do that. But you want to make sure that they are qualified to before you do it. Or we had talked about this earlier, Glenn. A lot of times YouTube is really helpful, and I will say YouTube is very helpful for a lot of things. But you've got to be careful about who you're listening to on YouTube.
There's a lot of hacks out there who show you shortcuts to do something, and they're eliminating a lot of the original systems that the vehicle, maybe for them it's okay, but for you to do that to your car, now a whole bunch of stuff isn't working right. They're steering in the wrong direction.
Right, and you just want to make sure that you're getting good information, right, Glenn? That's the key, whatever you're going to do, and if you're going to be a do-it-yourselfer, hey, I'm all for it. Problem is, the only thing that I say is make sure that you get the right information before you go down that road. Whenever I'm doing something around the house that I'm not really familiar with, and if I want to tackle it myself, most of the time I'll look up 5 or 10 YouTube videos.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
see what the difference is and what people say. And when people start talking about shortcuts, I really have to really take a look at it, a lot of different ones, because if you're going to take a shortcut, sometimes they teach you the wrong thing. How many times has your master tech showed one of your your B or C techs a shortcut, and sometimes then they take a shortcut, and then they take a shortcut, and then pretty soon they're not doing the job correctly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not always looking for a shortcut. If there's a way to make a job easier for us, subsequently it costs the customer less. It makes it easier for the tech. And some of these things are
just got to be careful.
Yeah, you have to be careful. And oftentimes they work just great, and it'll it causes no harm and no problem.
Yeah, sometimes it's okay, but there again, you kind of got to do a little bit of research before you get yourself into it, because you don't want to cause yourself a bigger problem, because then the car gets towed to my shop or Glen's shop, and then what we end up doing is we're finding out that this could have been an easy fix, but now it's a hard fix, or now it's a lot more expensive.
Yeah, it was too hard to put that last bolt in, so they left it out, and now you got a loose steering rack or something,
Yeah, something crazy happens.
Those everything that's there, it was engineered to be there for a reason.
Well, you know what, Glen? I think I hope everybody out there in podcast land is getting something from this, and we hope that it helps you if you are a do-it-yourselfer, or if you're just looking for the right thing to do, or a shop to help you. Do your research.
Yeah. Get the facts, Jack. That's what I always say.
That's the facts, Jack. Well, Glen, it's been another great episode. Good to see you as usual, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody in the next podcast.
Thanks for listening.